pleasure to have this nice gathering over Zoom to discuss a very important book that has been published in 2017. It has been written by Mr. Peter Everington by the title of عمل حسابك يا خواجة, a very interesting title, Watch Your Step Khawaja. It has been published by Muntada Dal al-Thaqafi, and it might be of great importance also to mention that there is an available Arabic translation of the book. I have to say it's an elegant Arabic translation done by Ustaz Awad al-Hassan, so a big thank you to him as well. Many thanks to this privileged venue, Book Club 81, for hosting the event and making it possible. And a big thank you actually for Mr. Peter Everington, or shall I say Ustaz Peter then, as his Sudanese students wish to call him. A big thank you for him for writing this magnificent book about his memories and encounters in Sudan. The book has been welcomed by welcomed greatly among many Sudanese readers and intellectuals alike, with significant passion and affection. And that's quite obvious from the amount of people who read the book, and some people wrote interesting articles about it. It's always available in the internet to have a look at, or maybe in a few Sudanese papers. So it's interesting to know that Mr. Everington's journey with Sudan goes back to the late 1950s. That was when he took a post of an English teacher job in Sudan Ministry of Education. That was exactly in 1958. So he was active in this profession up to 1966. So I think we are talking here about more than 8 years of experience in teaching in Sudan, and mixing with people there, and with all the events around him happening. So it's a great experience. Driven most probably by his early commitment to the moral rearmament group, or التسلح الخلقي, as he rightly kind of translated to Arabic in his book, as well as an open mind set up towards different cultures, and trials of finding common grounds between some different poles in our world, like Islam and Christianity, East and West, or shall I say South and North, as described in the Tayyib Saleh narratives. So driven by all these factors, and also maybe by his early military service in the British Army within the Far East, as well as we have to kind of mention an important thing. Peter has chosen to study Arabic in the last year within his Cambridge studies. So driven by all these factors, probably Ustaz Peter arrived to the Sudan, and the moment his plane landed there was in Wadi Sayyidina airport. It was a very common airport there in Durman. I think it's still used up to now. It's a military kind of airport at the moment. So ironically, it was very near to the famous Kariri battle field, or Battle of Durman, that took place decades ago before Peter's arrival there. So beside his personal memories and accounts in Sudan, Peter's book portrays a detailed image of lots of social, cultural, and political bits and pieces within the most crucial moments of our country's history. I think it's really the most crucial moments of our country's history. This is the right description for it, because Peter witnessed the turbulent post-independence era with all its odds and failures, as well as hope and glimpses of reform, and obviously the dreams of idealistic plans to take Sudan to the next level among nations. So it's really kind of a common kind of thought at that time. Whatever the outcome was, it seems that Peter was open to many honest and loyal friendships with a wide range of Sudanese people from different cultural and ethnical backgrounds, as well as professional backgrounds. It's really amazing, actually, when you read the book, and this ability to establish and maintain these friendships with different people from different kind of backgrounds. It's really amazing. The book records his long-lived friendships with people like Omar Jack, Lafallah Al-Haj Yusuf, both you, Joseph Lago, Muhammad Al-Mustafa, Muhammad Al-Murtada Mustafa,
Right.
Sayyid Ahmed al-Mahdi, Imam al-Hadi al-Mahdi. So there is interesting accounts of most of his brilliant students as well. He wrote about this in details. One of them was His Excellency Dr. Nuruddin Sati, Professor Zakaria Bashir Imam, and a few of them were mentioned there in the book. It's quite interesting to know that Ali Usman, Muhammad Taha, and Umar al-Bashir were among his students in Khartoum Secondary School within the 60s. I think it's called later on Madrasa al-Khartoum al-Qadima, if I'm not mistaken, afterwards.
Yes.
So Ustaz Peter accounts also include people whom you might not even take notice of their role and significant contribution in our societies. Take an example of Usman, the driver. I got very interested in this character, who used to work in what we knew later as the Faculty of Education, University of Khartoum, and Faki Adam as well. So these characters, he kind of portrayed a good image of them and how they kind of blend nicely within the texture of the book and the narrative of everything there. It might be a good idea also to talk about Peter's career after leaving Sudan, because that will give us a full picture about everything. So as expected, Peter became a full-time volunteer in the Moral Rearmament Group in 1967. He's married to another MRA volunteer, who's Jean, his wife, in 1972. Marriage has been since that time. And they're together based in London at the moment. His work afterwards included a lot of service and training in the Moral Rearmament Conference Centers in the UK, Switzerland, and India. Interestingly enough, Peter has got 25 years of experience with British Arab student exchange programs. And that was mainly in Sudan, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, different places in the Middle East. Thankfully involved the Jazeera University and Khartoum University to take a part of this program. And the most interesting bit is Peter's connection with Sudan never stopped. So he came back in 25 visits in different times to visit Sudan, just to maintain his personal friendships with Sudanese people and support of peacekeepers and all these kinds of things. He lectures also on moral rearmament at the Muslim College in London in training courses for Malaysian imams. He's been using his experience to help the British Christians and others to relate helpfully to the Muslim world. I don't want to talk too much, because if I go into details, might be kind of consuming a lot of time. The book is really appealing, and you can go non-stop on a non-stop speech about it on its encounters. So we'll now open the. I think it's a good time to open the floor for discussion, genuine discussion among the club members, to shed more light on this book which we're discussing today. So let's see if there's anyone who wants to contribute. Shall I know? Imam Ahmed al-Mahdi, are you there?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. How are you?
How are you? Are you okay? Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
Ahmed, great to see you.
Thank you so much. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we're hearing very well, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I can speak now?
Yes, you can indeed, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, then. First of all, I will address you, Muhammad Musa Abdullah al-Hashimi, for chairing this meeting. And then also, I address our respectable audience and participants, and all the ladies and gentlemen who are listening to us or trying to get some talk with us. First of all, salams and greetings to all. I am grateful for being asked to talk on this occasion. Indeed, I am very happy to be able to participate in this discussion, the discussion about this important book written by my great friend, Peter Everington. What's your step, Khawaja? Very, very beautiful name for the book. I don't know how you made it. At the start, I would like to point out that really the very name of this book shows the extent of genuineness from the part of the author. The book is so valuable, not because it treats the life of this great friend of mine and his story in the Sudan and with Sudanese people, but it also registers so much about the Sudan and its people. May God help our country in these difficult days of war and save the Sudan from the horrors which they're experiencing now. We all pray for this. So please ask God to help. This book is extraordinary. It is informative, comprehensive, and colorful in many aspects. It is exciting to academicians, tourists, learned, and ordinary people. Everything in this book is so real. The stories, the experiences, even the photographs are so real, taken by the author himself. The whole book is full of spirit, really, and guidance and genuineness. As the Arabic phrase goes, min al-qalb wal-qalb, from heart to heart. Many books are written about the Sudan by Europeans and English people. But this book is different in the sense that it has no ulterior motive whatsoever, no hidden objectives or the political propaganda of the colonial time. And this reminds us with the conclusion of Professor Holt. I don't know if he's still alive, but we wish him best in earth or in heaven. Professor Holt said, for example, about the history of the Mahdiya in the Sudan, all what has been written, he said, was political propaganda, specially designed in order to pave the way for the invasion of the Sudan. Everybody who wrote about the Mahdiya had his source from these books. He named them, about 4 or 5 books. And so about the Mahdiya, the history that has been written and the information that's available was so misleading. This is part of the causes of confusion, really, in Sudanese political affairs especially. But this book, in spite of its writer being a colonialist by birth, he is not one at all. In fact, he's something very different. Peter is about this book. You see, he is so much influence about the principles of moral, of purity, unselfishness, honesty, and love. Being himself a God-guided man who is a real Christian, living a Christian life, and who believes in a new world order of ethics, morals, and human fellowship. Those principles, of course, are the principles of the late Dr. Frank Buchman, the initiator of moral preambles. That reality of Peter's thoughts and philosophy gives the book a special flavor that makes it, in my opinion, a unique book. I was going to say that I wish it has been translated, but said Dr. Mohammed tells me the book is already translated. I'm so happy. And Peter, please make us read the book in its Arabic form. The story of Faki Adam, which Peter mentions when he was talking about the Ansar, is a very important one. Here is a man, learned man of Muslim culture. In fact, he is one of the leaders of the Ansar, Faki Adam Mansour. He belongs to a very important tribe from Darfur. This man came to know Peter in my house. They had a number of occasions of talks. And Peter is very fond of him. He always asked me about him and his health. May God bless his soul. And he told me one day something very strange. He said, "Sir, you know, Peter is a Muslim." I said, "Oh, Faki Adam, how do you know this?" He said, "When his talk, his manners, his behavior, I think he's a Muslim." So this shows really that we are here looking at two God-guided men. No matter what religion they have, they cannot differ. They are so close to each other. Thank you so much. God bless you all. And bless you, Peter, and your family. And award you for this great achievement of writing this exciting book. And thanks everybody for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sayyid Ahmed Al-Mahdi. Thank you very much. That's a very good speech about the book, actually. And it's heart-to-heart kind of talk, which is really good. Right. So, anyone interested to say something before we pass the microphone to Peter? All right, Peter, over to you then. You want to comment on what Sayyid Ahmed said?
Well, it means a great deal to me to hear what Sayyid Ahmed has just said, and I thank God for him, and I thank him And I still think it was one of the most remarkable things in history that the Mahdi people had raised their revolution and then suffered their defeat at Kerry, and somehow they maintained their faith and found elements in the British rulers that they could relate to, as Said Ahmed has often told me. And his father, his instinct would be to take up arms again, he said that he found in some of the British a quality of integrity, which made him feel that there was a peaceful road to independence in wise cooperation with the British for development of agriculture and other areas. And so it was an emotional time for me, as someone colonial by birth, to be a guest of Said Ahmed on Jazeera Abba, the sort of sacred home and center of the Ansar. And in the book is a poem I wrote to muse on that event. I think there's just one thing I'd like to say by way of introduction, my background and my family. And since I'm among doctors, this has a medical flavor, this story. And I just wish that my Arabic was good enough to conduct this whole conversation with you in Arabic. But I did work a bit on this little piece. في الستينات أنا كنت مدرس في مدرسة خرطوم الثانوية 61 ولو 62 ويوما كان عندي ثلول على وجهي, a wart on my forehead. ومشيت مستشفى الخرطوم بدون ميعاد وقابلت مساعد طبي وهو قال لي اركب في الكنبة وأخذ إبرة كهربائية وحرك الثلول, والألم كان بسيط, ولكن هو اللي قال لي بعدين حبوبتك لازم جعليها. So now you know my family origins. But having said that, I just want seriously to identify with the terrible things you were going through, the time you were going through, your families and friends, and the awful happenings in Sudan just now. And I know you've all been personally affected. And I just feel it must feel for you almost like after the Battle of Kerry in 1898, the destruction of everything you held dear at that time. And I suppose amongst you and amongst Said Abdurrahman and others, it must have been hard to believe that God had a plan for the future. And yet somehow, through the ups and downs and through a new kind of patriotism, a new Sudan emerged. And now amid this desolation, I feel we all, for all our nations, have to hold on to the belief that God is almighty and has a plan for his world. And he also has the instruments, the people who can bring reconciliation and something new. And you are the patriots with your great expertise in the medical and other fields. You know what is needed, and it falls to you to train up a new generation of patriots who will lay the foundations for the future. And I pray for your success in that. And I pray that this challenge will also impact Britain and the countries of the West to break out of our own self-centeredness and self-indulgence, and in a new kind of way, not a controlling way, but a partnership way, we can find our part alongside you in building what needs to be done. And I think this was the privilege that I had in my day, as coming to Sudan as a young man of 23 and having such experiences and friendships and enjoyment and purpose alongside you all, and being taken in as one of the family, which I still feel I am. So this is what I try to give expression for in the book. And I said, Ahmed, I don't know if you know what the story behind the title, Ya Khawaja Amal Hisabak. This was said to me by a 6-year-old boy on the year that, and the day that Aboud's government, military government, fell. As you remember, thousands of people came out in the streets to celebrate. And I walked from my flat nearby, the only Khawaja in sight, just out of curiosity to see what was going on. And my idea is that one father of this boy saw me coming, and I'm just guessing, he said, what is this Khawaja doing, interfering in our moment of celebration? This is not his place. So when I got level with him, the boy sitting on the bicycle looked at me very severely and said, Ya Khawaja, Amal Hisabak. So that was the story behind the title.
Right, really fascinating. Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, that's really interesting. Dr. Khalid Farah, is he around?
Yes, I am.
دكتور خالد فرح، السلام
Yes.
عليكم، كيف أحوالك؟
عليكم السلام.
الله يبارك فيك. You want to say something about the book? Yeah.
Frankly speaking, I hadn't had the opportunity to read this book, and my participation as for the first time in this club is just to learn a little bit about this experience, and to sort of initiate myself into your realm. And I think with time it can be useful and say something meaningful in your discussions of other books, inshallah.
Sure,
but
sure.
So far had an idea about the book from the presentation given by Imam Ahmed al-Mahdi and the comment of the author himself. Obviously, that's a very interesting book, and it portrays the images of the Sudan of the 50s and the 60s.
That's fine. Now, I'm sure that after the end of this Zoom session, you'll definitely get the book and you'll enjoy it, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Khalid Farah. Thank you very much. I think there's someone there, Omnia, in the background. Yeah, Omnia, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
إن شاء الله كويسين. أنا بنت دكتور نصر الدين، هو معاكم بس.
أهلا أمنية, how are you? تفضلي.
I'm good, alhamdulillah. So actually, I read the book. I thought it was very interesting. I liked it a lot, and I think my favorite chapter was Englishman on a Train. I found that very funny. I just had one question for Peter, if it's okay. Because, of course, you are an Englishman who came to Sudan. Is there any moments that you felt like you were really an outsider, or were there people who really helped you feel like you were at home while you were in Sudan?
Thank you.
Thank you, Omnia. Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Peter. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Omnia. Are you a doctor as well?
Not yet, but hopefully in the future I will be.
Well,
Omnia is a high school student. She's the daughter of our colleague Nasruddin.
oh, very good. Well, Glad to meet you.
Dr. Nusreddin. Yeah.
Nice to meet you too.
Just to add, Umnia was the youngest presenter in our club, and she actually gave a very good presentation and a very good ideas and opinion on the book she presented. So just to add, thank you very much.
Thank you. Shukran.
And also, Peter, Omnia was she read the book from before, and I got a call from her father, Dr. Nusreddin. She was kind of, looking forward for the discussion of this book. So it's really good that we have her here today.
Yes.
Just to give an idea about her. Yeah.
Is this Nasruddin Al-Hadi?
No, it's not Nusreddin. Dr. Nusreddin is one of the Sudanese doctors working in Ireland.
Oh, right. Yes.
I met him there. Yeah, he's one of our colleagues. Yeah.
Well, it's a good question, and I'm casting my mind back. I just arrived, felt completely ignorant. I just felt completely ignorant. But I found with the Sudanese, if I could be free from fear, I could go towards them. And I just met an open heart in just about everybody I met. And there were strange customs, strange foods, things I had to get used to. And as I say, ignorance of the history and all of that. But I found that when I was asked questions and wanted to learn, I was given friendship. And at a most extraordinary level. Once I was on a train from Wad Medani back to Khartoum. In those days, that was the way to go, and it took 6 hours in the train. And I greeted a man there, and it turned out he was the headmaster of the Omdurman Girls' School, and he invited me into his section of the carriage with his wife and children, and we had lemon taza and tea and coffee and lemon all the way through, and we talked for most of the 6 hours, and then he said to me, "Where are you staying in Khartoum?" Because I was teaching in Port Sudan at that time. So I said, "Well, I expect I'll go to a hotel." And he said, had a word with his wife, and he said, "Please come and stay with us." And with this complete stranger of a few hours before, I stayed in his home for 4 days. And then he took me to the train and put me on the train to Port Sudan. I think that's exceptional in any country to find that. But I think this is the reputation of the Sudanese at their best. And we kept our friendship, we corresponded. And one thing which happened was that a few years later, he was in charge of the marking of the exams, the intermediate school exam, final exams for entry to secondary. And so all of our secondary school teachers from the different subjects, we would go to a school, in this case, Hantub, and for a week we would be marking the exam scripts of about 8,000 to 10,000 students in our subjects, a whole group of us. And he was in charge of it. And I was in charge of the marking of the English composition. And there was some national difficulty came up about this exam. The subject had been misinterpreted, one of the questions, and people had, in all innocence, written on the wrong subject. And there were complaints in the paper to the Ministry of Education, and the whole exam should be cancelled. And he said to me, "What do you think?" I said, "Give me a morning." And with the other British teachers, we spent a whole morning going over this thing and went back to him. And convinced him that it was all right. We could market it fairly. And he was able to convey that to the ministry. But it all went back to the basic building of trust between us two as individuals, that we could trust each other in such things.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's really fascinating. I think the fact of you traveling with a completely stranger person to you, and this is something kind of unique to Sudan, isn't it?
Well, I guess so. I haven't heard of that degree.
Yeah, sure. Right. Thank you very much, Peter. I think Dr. Muhammad Babikir is there. Dr. Muhammad, yeah, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank Professor Peter for his time. My question might look irrelevant, but I'll anyway ask it. In your book, Professor Peter, you mentioned feeling that certain Sudanese individuals were more Christian than you, while others made you feel more Muslims than them.
Yeah.
If you were placed in a similar situation today between brackets, and you are an English teacher, would your feeling remain unchanged? Thank you.
Well, I think there are two issues here: is what we believe, and the other is how we live. And so here was I, a Christian. How would it be among Muslims? And in the Bible, there's a list of virtues, 9 of them. It's called the fruits of the Spirit of God: love, joy, peace, caring for people, patience, self-control, humility. There are 9 of them. I can never remember the complete 9. So if you meet someone who is a Muslim and who is living these Christian virtues, what are you to think? And my answer is that the one God who we serve, who made us all, has implanted in all of us the capacity to know right from wrong, and by his grace to live the way he wants us to live, to make a better world. And it's very obvious, as it was in my case, when I'm not living that. I think what you're referring to is that one day at Khartoum Secondary School, I had a toothache. I needed to go to the doctor, so I carefully arranged it in a spare when I wasn't teaching, that I could go to the doctor and get my tooth seen to. And I went along, and when I knocked at the door of the compound of the dentist, the servant came and said, "The dentist's sister has died. He is not here." And I was immediately annoyed that I was not going to get my tooth seen to. And then just at that moment came a Muslim Sudanese man, and he heard this story, and he immediately said, "Ya Salam, I'm so sorry to hear of this death." And I felt challenged that this man is more Christian than I am. He lives what I'm supposed to live. The other side of the coin, for those who've read the book will remember that I tried hard to get a telephone from the Ministry of Communications, and there was no reply. And I kept asking, and then somebody said to me, "You have to bribe a certain person, either with £5 or with a bottle of whiskey." So I went back to the senior of this man and said, I've been told this and I'm not going to pay a bribe, but I would like a telephone. And he refused. And I went up to the director of the Ministry of Communications, got the same answer. And finally, I saw the minister and he said, where do you live? And I said, a certain place near Shari al Jama. And he said, oh, that's near me. And there's a spare line on the telegraph pole. So from the minister's personal thing. So I felt perhaps in this case, I was perhaps a better Muslim than some of the members of this ministry.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
Right.
you,
Yeah.
Professor.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, and I can see from the book also, I remember a few things you mentioned in the book from the other side as well. So I think it works both sides.
Yes.
Because you did mention that when some Sudanese people see something kind of, quite human done by a Khawaja, they'll say in Arabic, as you quoted in your book, "Billah shuf al-insaniya di kif." So that kind of addresses this thing from two sides as well. So both people are just kind of adopting similar values in a center, which is kind of common between the two religions.
Yes.
Right. Right. I think we have a question here, which I've just came over. Someone was speaking about you witnessed a lot of events since you arrived to Sudan. You arrived to Sudan actually, I think, within the coup of General Aboud time, and then you left Sudan after the Thawrat October. So lots of events at that time. So you did also mention all these kind of things in your book as well. And what astonished me as well and kind of captured my attention, your portrayal of Harran. He's one of the martyrs of this revolution. We know him by name, but we don't know a lot of him, a lot of details about him. But your book included a lot of things. It might be a good idea to shed a bit of light about your experience with Harran and the kind of atmosphere of the revolution in the Faculty of Education, which is called later on Faculty of Education in University of Khartoum. And if you want to tell us a little bit more about that, please.
All right. Well, and yesterday in my time of morning meditation, it's been my habit since student days to take an hour of meditation, of quiet prayer and thought and reading the Bible, and then perhaps writing down thoughts which come. And I write the date as well in a little book. And so yesterday in this little book, I wrote down November the 17th, Aboud's coup. Yesterday, the anniversary of Aboud taking over. I always remember that date. And it happened just 2 months after I arrived in the Sudan. And I taught 2 of Aboud's sons in Khartoum Secondary. And I met Aboud when he came on his state visit to Britain. A basically fine man. But of course, what you're talking about was the restlessness in 1964, when people got tired of the military government and the war was going on in the south. And so there was this student uprising starting in Khartoum University. And for me, a very sorrowful thing, because the army said that anybody who marched that day would be shot after. And so a group of my students from the Higher Teacher Training Institute went on this march, and they were shot. And altogether, there were, I think, about 40 people killed outside the post office, Shari al Jama. And I visited my student, Haran, in Khartoum Hospital and talked with him for several minutes the night before he died. And he became one of the sort of heroes of the revolution alongside Qureshi. And in Khartoum University, there were, along the avenue of palm trees in the center, there were two statues of profiles, head profiles of Qureshi and Haran. So Haran I was lecturing at this higher teacher training institute, training young men and women to be teachers. And he was one of those students who a lecturer appreciates, because you'd say something and instead of sort of writing it down and nodding, you'd see him, hey, is this true or not? You'd see him thinking. And then he'd ask a question, I mean, politely but firmly, to test me out. And he had that kind of independence, a wonderful dignity of independence, which that's the best thing that there can be between a teacher and student. And then I discovered that some of the students at the institute wanted to know more about classical music, and they wanted to learn the violin. And of course, the violin is used in Sudanese music quite a lot. So I took an interest in that, as I'm keen on music. And then talking to Haran, I discovered that none of them knew anything about European classical music. So I said, would you like me to introduce you to classical music? And so once a week, I came along with my gramophone, as it was, and these long playing records. And I played some of the music. And one of them was Beethoven's Violin Concerto by David Ostrach, the Russian violinist. And this, to me, is one of the loveliest pieces of music that's ever been written. And I just played the first movement to these students. And Haran listened absolutely entranced by it. And he said, is this the same instrument that we are learning? And I said, yes, it is. And I'll come back next week and play the second and third movements. And that's when the revolution happened, and Haran died. And I went to see him in hospital, and I complimented him on his courage. And he said, I would give the last drop of my blood for my country. Now, anybody could say that in an abstract way, but here's a man dying with tubes in him. And then he said another thing. What are the British newspapers saying about us? And to me, that was also a sacred thing for Britain, an expectation that the British at their best would be interested in Sudan and concerned and report it honestly. So I still feel grieved that he died and that I couldn't play him the other two movements. But then I think in paradise, where I hope he is, he'll be alongside Beethoven, and he'll be able to listen to all the music that has ever been played. And one day, please God, we shall meet again.
Thank you, Peter. That was really kind of also nicely written in the book, what you said there about Haran. I have a few questions here from the floor of the people who are participating here through messages. So I think Dr. Sakina Tom was saying that the question was, did you have a chance to teach in any girls' high school in Sudan at that time? And what were your thoughts about Sudanese women at that time?
Well, I had one rather amusing experience of this, because for the school certificate at that time, we would read a Shakespeare play. And there was a dispute amongst us British teachers whether it was fair to get the Sudanese to have to learn the Shakespeare's English. Some of us, including me, said, well, if this is their only chance of knowing Shakespeare, let's give them a chance. So there was I in Khartoum Boys Secondary teaching Macbeth to the boys, and they were just loving the stories of kingdom, power and glory and battles and bloodshed and everything. And then one day I got a message from Omdurman Girls Secondary to say that their British woman teacher was ill, and could I please go and teach a class on Romeo and Juliet, which is what the girls were studying. So this was a completely new experience with me, to suddenly find myself sitting in a classroom of 36 girls, and then the stage they'd got to was one of the most romantic passages in the whole story of Romeo and Juliet. So it was, shall we say, a very sort of unnerving and unusual experience, but I managed to get through it all right. So that was my one encounter at secondary level. But of course, in the Higher Teacher Training Institute, the Mahad al-Muallimin al-Ali, as it was now, the Kulliyat al-Tarbiyah, Khartoum University, I suppose about 1/5 or 1/6 of the students were girls. And so and the custom was that the girls would sit in the front row of they wear their tobes, and they would sit in the front row and the men behind them. So this was, again, something to get used to, and it just felt very normal. And in the book, for those who've seen it, there's a picture of a graduation ceremony where one of the girls is showing me her diploma, whatever we called it, with her husband, with her brother looking on. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm just happy with all the big development that's been since I left all those years ago.
Thank you very much, Peter. Right, so I have there's a message here from Dr. Nuruddin Satti. He said, "Thank you, my friends, for the invitation. I am unable to join because of prior commitment in a conference."
Can we hear from him?
Cairo. Yes, he just sent a message there, Dr. Nuruddin Satti, saying that he's not able to attend because he had a conference to attend in Cairo. He said,
hello, my friends. Hello, my Ustaz Peter and my dear friends. Thank you so much for the invitation and for joining in late.
Yes. Okay.
I'm very sorry, actually. I'm still, in one of the functions of the conference, and unfortunately, I'm unable to join you. But I insisted just to say those few words, to ask you for the invitation and to greet my great Ustaz and friend Peter Everington. Thank you really very much. Thank you.
Well, that's great to see you, Noor, and
great to see you, Ustaz. Ahlan wa sahlan. Great to see you too.
Alhamdulillah, and thank you so much again for the introduction you wrote it to the book.
Allah sallam, Ustaz. So I am sorry, not to be able to continue with you because I'm expected to join a meeting, a small committee that we have here at this meeting. So I wish you well and all the best. And thank you very much, really. Thank you.
Well, I know you're one of the.
أستاذ. مع السلامة أستاذ.
مع السلامة.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا.
كتر خيرك.
مع السلامة for everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
وعليكم السلام. Thank you, Dr.
شكرا.
Nov18.
مع
Thank you very
السلامة.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Dr. Abdullah. Yes. Go
I
ahead.
want to have a comment.
Yeah.
Question. I would like again to thank you for being here for this very valuable book. I really learned a lot about the recent history of Sudan, geography, people, relationship, and even the what a meaning life means. I understood from reading the book that you lived in Sudan. You lived in Sudan for 8 years.
Yes.
I've been here in Alabama for more than 30 years. I don't have even 1,000th of a fraction of the memory you made there or the difference you made. The events, the places you visit, the people you formed relation with, the difference you made makes me feel really sorry for myself, to tell you the truth. And I'm not sure if the rest of, is this 8 years different from, are they unique? And I read also, I want to hear also from the other Peter Hawley and Peter Brook, if you don't mind. I was reading an article that he was a goalkeeper in Port Sudan one time.
Yes.
And by the way, I wanted to call the book, I thought, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this word in Arabic, shalaga. Shalaga means we call somebody who's dangerously adventurous shalig.
Oh.
So I thought the book should be called Shalagat Khawaja rather than Ahmed Hisab. And thank you again. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a very big compliment to Shalaga. And also, please, everybody here, if there are mistakes in the book or things you disagree with, please say.
Is it better to say what I mean the title instead of this, to say take care, Khawaja? Mind your step is, for me, is not familiar, maybe because I mixed with Welsh language.
Well, there we are. I'm afraid that's done now, and but I value your suggestion.
No, am I right or wrong? You are my ustaz.
Well, I think sometimes we British, we take ourselves too seriously, and so to be reproved by a 6 or 7-year-old boy was just a bit of fun. That's how I took it anyway.
Excellent. The last thing, if you don't mind, the one who is raising his hand, is this a memoir or a biography? If it is not a biography, when we will read yours, and the adding to that, when it will come out, of course, many pages or part of it will be about Sudan. I hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Peter, go ahead. I think there's a question from Usman there about your if you're kind of writing a book about your life afterwards. Are you is that Sudan is going to be kind of part of it as well, or?
No, I'm not writing a book about life afterwards, but I have got a collection of papers connected with Sudan and other countries, Iran, Malaysia, where I have worked. So, and just thoughts about the Muslim world and Britain's relationship with it. You know, a series of thoughts like this. So I'm just wondering what to do with these papers. I think the Sudan papers I will offer to Durham University Library, the Sudan archive there. But I'm finding difficulty in cataloging these papers. But I'm not going to write an autobiography.
Right. Thank you very much, Peter. I think there's a few people there waiting to contribute. There's Nusraddin, Dr. Nusraddin, and then Barry al-Bashir. We'll take Dr. Nusraddin firstly, and then we'll pass it over to Barry. Yeah, Nusraddin. Yeah, go ahead.
شكرا محمد. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
السلام عليكم Mr. Everington.
Alaikum assalam.
Actually, I read most of the book, but I didn't finish the book. But I was impressed by the nice photographs you have. You seem you are a professional photographer. Can you hear me?
Yes, I have, and the answer is no. I think I had a nice camera, and I have. I believe I have an eye for beauty and grandeur, and a sense of occasion. So when I felt like it, I just pressed the button, and there we are. But I have no training.
Especially the scene of the Nile in Medani, in the before sunset and after sunset, and it was very beautiful. This is beside the other picture you took from Wadi Halfa. My comments, actually, I just have few comments, not about the book, but what I have come through when reading the book. You have a sense of humor, as you mentioned that by God, when you have a lunch with the Khawaja, it is as if you were fasting. This is one of the things that, and also, and I want your real reaction to these comments. This one, and when you are standing in the goalkeeper in Surab, and the boy says that this Khawaja Del Balehu Aukaz, and you said it rightly. That Khawaja is like someone who has swallowed a stick. And another one, when you have in Ramadan, you said you were fasting that day when you have been with Dr. Salah al-Malek at his home, and they gave you marara. I just want you to see to tell us exactly your experience about that. And one more thing that I think you said during one of the pages, I think bed 93, you are asked to give a lecture on Bach's Ronan Day, and the lecture is the concept of happiness in the emerging countries. I just want you to exactly to know in a brief what you have said in this regard, the concept of happiness in the emerging countries. And last not least, I would say sharaftana, and you know sharaftana.
I'd say sharaf ala kadrakum.
Okay, and thank you very much for that. And it was actually very informative book. And I think my daughter asked you a question earlier. I was encouraging her to read the book, but she didn't read it, the whole book. But I wanted her, because you are a witness to the history, or to the period for her is the history. And hopefully we'll have another chance to talk about your book and your experience in Sudan. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for your kind comment and for your daughter's contribution. This lecture on the concept of happiness was a big effort, and it's about 6 pages, and I could send the whole text to you if through Dr. Mohammed Al-Mustafa, we could exchange email addresses. I'll gladly send that to you and welcome any comment.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you very much, Peter. I think before we
For
pass
tomorrow.
the microphone over to Barry, thank you, Dr. Nusraddin. I wanted to say something as well about that bit which Dr. Nusraddin just mentioned. You mentioned in your book that when you invite the Sudanese to lunchtime, you expect him to arrive 2 hours later or something like that. So just a quick question. After your 25 visits to Sudan, did this kind of thing change or is still the same? I think presume it's still the same. What do you think?
What you mean, the Sudanese habit of saying no when you ask them a second? Yes.
Yes, and the Sudanese habit of coming late to the invitation time. You know, you usually say it's 12 o'clock, they come at 2 o'clock. You mentioned that, so.
Yes, well, yes, this is a habit which I think still has to be got used to.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Thank you, Peter. Now we'll pass it over to Barry al-Bashir. I think he's one of the contributors to this book. Thank you very much for attending today.
Well, he's
go ahead,
may I say he is the noble man who, at his own time and expense, put the whole thing online out of friendship and conviction. I'm very greatly indebted to him as much as I am to the publishers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. مساء الخير الحضور الكريم. It was an absolute pleasure working with you on this. And I still remember that night, maybe 6 years ago, when we had that coffee at your hospitable house, and I said, we need to democratize the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I was one of those who was privileged to study at Khartoum al-Qadima. And through your book, I managed to travel back on time and see the pictures and remember when I was playing on those fields and studying on those plazas. So immense thank you on that. And I had a question, and perhaps it will be interesting for everyone else. I mean, extraordinary pictures, as Dr. Nusraddin said. I certainly seen a lot of the stories I've heard from my great-grandfather who lived in Nahut, who talked about Jabal Marra and how beautiful it is, but I could not see it until 30 years after he passed away. And when I saw the book, I could finally know what my great-grandfather was talking about in terms of Jabal Marra. The question is around your visit to Jazeera Aba, right? Very brave man to make such a move, right? So would like to understand what were your feelings and emotions when you have accepted the invitation of the Imam al-Hadi, and how that relationship developed from that moment onwards. And also a little bit more around, I know the story, but it would be good for everyone to know about your sentiment and your feeling when you heard the sad news that he was killed in the borders.
Right, Barry. Well, I felt it was a very great privilege to be invited to Jazeera Aba for the Eid, and to be there as the guest of this is Sayyid Ahmed's older brother we're talking about, Sayyid al-Hadi. A very great privilege as an Englishman to be there. And I kind of felt there were a million people at that prayer session, and a most extraordinary outpouring of faith and devotion. And I come from a country and a civilization which is forgetting God and the scriptures, and is spiritually underdeveloped and needs to rediscover faith and the practice of faith. So it's always moving to me to be in an occasion like that of Eid prayers. And I think at that time I was 29 years old, and during those days and the quieter moments in the morning, perhaps have breakfast with the Imam. And one day he just, with one or two others there, he took me into confidence and said he was worried about the state of the country. This is in the book, but and he thought that it would be solved if he could become the leader, the president, something like that. And I don't know if this was his own idea or someone else had put it to him. I think he was a very genuine patriot. He was a man who had unexpectedly come to leadership after his older brothers, and his great thing was he was a man of the people and a man of the soil, of agriculture. And in my time of meditation the next morning, I felt worried for him. And I wrote down some thoughts that this was perhaps not his particular calling. Perhaps he had a spiritual calling for the whole of the Sudanese people, north, south, east, and west, to be their pointer towards the practice of faith and to give that kind of moral leadership rather than seek political office. And normally, you know, when you get some thoughts like that, you ought to convey them to someone who is your host and your friend. But as I looked at them, I was afraid. I thought, who am I, as a young foreigner, not a Muslim, to say this to a man of great status and dignity? And if there's anybody else in this work of moral rearmament, it needs to be somebody senior. And so I backed away from saying to him what I deeply felt. And I forgot about it until back home came the dreadful news that, you know, he'd been spoken out against Numeri, and Numeri had bombed Jazeera Abba, and he had, Said al-Hadi had to flee to the Ethiopian border, and at the border he'd been taken in by the police and just shot. And this I read, this is 5 years after I'd been his guest. I heard it on the radio in the north of England, and I wept for the loss of a friend and a good man. But then I thought, and I wrote to the newspaper, the Times, a bit of obituary about him. But then I suddenly one day thought, hey, what about these thoughts in my meditation? Why did I not share them? And I thought it was my cowardice, my fear of losing his approval, selfish reasons for not doing that. And I felt I needed to apologize to Said Ahmed, Said Sadiq al-Mahdi, and others of the family for not doing what I should have done. And the answer I got was, from some of them, was, well, others spoke to him in that way, and he didn't pay attention. So don't worry. But I did worry, because I think true friendship means that you're ready to say the strongest, deepest thing you feel, even if it's going to mean losing the friendship. You've got to be fully open and honest. And so I'm still ashamed of that quality or in me at the time. And I think I've learned from it. I've learned, and sometimes when you speak, it turns out you're wrong. And sometimes you're right. But the important thing is to do the thing which perhaps the Almighty has put in your heart to do. So anyway, does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Right. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Barry. The few people waiting there to contribute as well. Usman Yassin, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Yes,
Yes, we hear you very well. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Peter. I enjoyed your book and photos also. And I know that I enjoy what I read when I become a slow reader. I finished the book 2 days ago, and I thought to go back and have a revision on it. Actually, I have got a lot to talk about it, but I'm interested in some parts which you mentioned in your book. You told your experience in the Middle East and Africa, in Kenya, in Boursaid, Tabor Tawfiq, and Crater in Aden, and in Sudan. And all are hot areas at that time. And especially you mentioned Harambee and MRA and the film Freedom, which was shown in roaming cinemas. And you mentioned that 700,000 have seen that in Kenya. Do you think that these models can still hold true in our area? I mean, in Sudan, Africa, Middle East, with the new era of introduction of media, public media. Do you think that it can still hold true? Thank you very much indeed.
Well, that's a very big question, and I don't think I can answer it properly, but just one observation. Jomo Kenyatta was a remarkable man who had been, as you know, imprisoned by the British for his part in the independence struggle, and had a very hard time. And while he was in prison, he was visited by a group of white English farmers who apologized to him for their attitudes of superiority and injustice. And they showed him this African film made in Nigeria called Freedom. And he was very moved by it. And he said, please show this to the country now. And this is how Moral and people from many countries made it possible for the film to be shown in marketplaces and clubs all around the country to about 700,000 people. And it was counted as a contribution towards the peaceful, eventually, independence which came. And it was then that Kenyatta had this thought for the young people, Harambee, let's work together, you know, and it was the different tribes as well as the different races. And so out of that came the movement which you described, which the Sudan government then invited this inter-African show to Sudan in 1966. So I think that each of us ordinary individuals have the capacity to receive guidance from the Almighty about areas of personal life and national life that we care about. And I think that it's completely the same today, and leaders need support from ordinary people like ourselves to think what is going to unite and bring peace and harmony out of conflict. And whether you're an ordinary person, whether you're a leader, you may get a thought which is going to help. And I saw this, of course, as you will have read in the book, between Booth Dew from South Sudan and Dr. Murtada Mohammed al-Murtada Mustafa, and their friendship and common cause and care for each other, which was one part of what led to the peace process in 1972. So the Almighty is still there, wanting to guide with his thoughts, and any of us can, including not excluding the politicians, can find that quality. I think that's as much as I'm able to say now, but very much with prayers that this can happen in relation to the enormous crises we're in now. And I just think back to the amazing thing of what Anwar Sadat did in 1977 in going to Jerusalem, and what he said in the Knesset to the Israelis, and he lost his life, and Rabin later lost his life, but still the field is open for the men and women of courage who will do what is needed under the guidance of God.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's really informative. There's few people raising their hands here, Hanim and Abdulaziz. Before I take them, there is any contribution for Mr. Peter, from Mr. Peter Holy or Mr. Peter Shambrook?
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I did post in the chat about my feelings about the only 2 years I spent in your lovely country with such lovely people. I'm in a group of teachers who post quite regularly on Facebook about our experiences in the Sudan in the 1980s. And without hesitation, we all say that these days changed our lives. They were truly wonderful experiences with truly wonderful people. One of the earlier questions was whether we ever felt unwelcome in your country, and that was never the case, ever. So that was all I really wanted to say. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you this evening or morning or whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. Thank you to Dr. Abdulaziz Alamal, who I met in Dubai several years ago, for inviting me to join you this evening. And I look forward to reading Peter's book in detail when I have the time. So thank you very much.
That's great. Well, hats off to you, and look forward to further communication.
Thank you very much. Right, so I think we have Hanim Mustafa there. If you want to go ahead, Hanim. Hanim Mustafa, you can go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Peter.
Assalamu
alaikum, everybody. It's really a pleasure to join you today. Well, we are so emotional and thrilled, and we went back to, all the memories with you, Peter, in having me in your book, mentioning me in your book. It's really a pleasure that you have attended my wedding in Umdurman. And always I tease Tariq, my brother, that
تمام. لكن قلت لها يعني اللي قدامنا الماسك وكده يعني
that
الحمد لله
Peter
هي المعالجة.
that Peter mentioned me, not you, Tariq. So we always made a joke about this, and I have 2 copies of your book here in California in my house, Peter. And of course, we always remember your walks with my dad at the River Nile when you stayed with us in Garden City, and of course, in you know, throughout our my life and of course, my dad's journey. You have been a great companionship and friends, and there is a lot to say. And I will make it short, and I'll give you my dad here to say hi to you.
Murtada. Oh, Murtada.
Yes.
Hello, Peter.
Hello, Murtada. Wonderful.
It is good to speak to you this morning from California, here in America. I thought so many times if I intervene or I deprive so many people from a chance to speak about the book. But with pressure from many friends, I have to say something. First, I think there is something which in the book, so many people either they overlook or they don't come to evaluate or to mention. First of all, there are so many people from the United States, from England, who worked in the Sudan and who wrote books, reference books about the British era in the Sudan. But one thing which they never intervened about is the deep relationship which was created between the Sudanese and the British people. Something which did not happen in any other country in the world, which used to have such relationship of the governor and the governed. When the British left the Sudan, so many aspects, of friendship was expressed. So many people went to the airports. They went to the railways to say goodbye to their friends from Britain. This did not happen in any country which experienced, British rule in the past. And this shows how deep there was this relation, even in the folklore of the people. And say, where were you, friend, this evening? You asked somebody, or at that time in the 60s. And the reply was, we went to say goodbye to our friends. Who are your friends? These are our friends who gave us the lorry, but unfortunate, without light and worry. It means, they gave us the lorry, and unfortunate, it is without light and worry. Intellectually, the book relationship with the people was very deep. It shows that how this relationship developed from the time when everybody wrote about the Mahdiya and how the Mahdiya, fought the British, and how the British fought the Mahdiya. And it mentioned in the British history an era where Churchill came to the front and became a hero in the British history. This period in history developed friendship. This friendship very much exemplify in the relationship which developed between you, Peter, and Sayyid Ahmed al-Mahdi. Ahmed al-Mahdi expressed the tolerance against the excesses which happened at that period. And that was very brave from a man like him. And it was also very brave from him to start a new era with you. You started an era where what went in the history, let it be history. And let us have a new relationship. And that happened, which for all the period you have been in the Sudan, you have been with the people of the Sudan, with their demonstrations, with their schools, with their learning, with their sports, and with all aspects of life. You have a hand. And this created a new relationship. A new relationship. Scholars wrote books about this period. They didn't at all touch and didn't at all speak about. And I think it is deep in the Sudanese people memoir and hearts, especially people who lived that period or the people who speak about that period of the 60s in the Sudan. It was a great chance, Peter, that he recorded this in this volume of book, which has all the benefits for somebody who didn't know about it or who knew about it, but who didn't know these aspects of friendship which developed. For that reason, I think this book has its benefit and has people to think deep, not, just entertained by the book. Peter, we are grateful that you brought up Sudan to this stage of knowledge, and we wish you all the best, you and your family. Bye.
Dr. Khairak, old friend Murtada, I learned so much from you and alongside you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad al-Murtada. We knew a lot about you in the book, actually. Thank you, Peter. There's Barry al-Bashir here. He wants to... Barry, تفضل.
It was just a clap to the very
right.
kind
Okay.
and very honest and sincere words we've just heard.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Totally agree. Right, Dr. Abdulaziz Usman. Dr. Abdulaziz Usman, go ahead. Wa alaikum assalam.
And I don't have much to say. Yes, I wanted to introduce first my friend Dr. Peter Holly, but already he spoke to us, and I would like to thank him that he accepted our invitation to attend this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Peter, Ustaz Peter, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, and let's be in touch.
Yes, thank you so much. But also, Ustaz Peter Holly, he is with us here and he spoke already, but it's still just people ask him to just to express his thoughts and emotions about Sudan, the feeling that when he was in Sudan in 80s. Maybe the period is different. That you were in 60s and Peter Holly in 80s was in 80s in Sudan. Maybe there is a difference between the two periods. Ustad Peter Holly is still here, or maybe he left?
I think he left.
Maybe he left.
Something in the chat.
Yeah. Maybe he left. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz. Thank you very much. Yes, over to you, Peter.
Is there something for me to say now?
I just wanted, if you want to comment on what Dr. Abdulaziz said, but
well, I was glad to hear from him.
Good. Right. Shaza Zahra, is she around? You still around, Shaza Zahra? I think I've seen you raising your hand a few minutes ago. There's plenty of people talking, so Shaza Zahra? No? Right. Right. If I have just one question as well for you, Peter. I was trying to jump through, but I couldn't find any time in between the people who are contributing and the great things which you've been hearing. In your book, you included lots of interesting different visions at that time. I think you did answer this question, but no harm of just kind of going through it again. You mentioned, you included lots of interesting different visions that might have not been quite popular at that time. And I quote in your book, you said, many of British employees in Sudan at that time had discovered it was possible to love another country, not just your own country. We realized that there were some things to be ashamed of from Britain's past, but the Sudanese also respected many of our countrymen for good things they had pioneered. Now in the era of independence and a new kind of partnership was open to our country, those of us who had arrived in our 20s were already marked for life by our experience of a fascinating country. So this kind of progressive vision and deep understanding of what you're up to for an English man in his early 20s, was it partly due to your active involvement in the moral rearmament group, or is it a vision that has been shaping your mind after the early years of British military service, seeing different countries in the Far East? I know you included your experience there, and coming closer to contact with realities of things over there, rather than dealing with things from thousands of miles away.
Well, that's a big question, and I don't really know how to answer it, but maybe this has been done, but I wish that some Sudanese Muslim scholar would do some research on the factor of Christianity in the British who worked in Sudan before and after independence. Because I think many, like myself, had been brought up in how, as Christians, we were supposed to live with the example of Jesus. And he was our model of the one God. And the idea was that we should live like him. And I think that is deep in British culture. Sometimes it's buried too deep to be forgotten. But when our new king, Charles, took the oath, made the promises at the coronation, he promised to be a servant not to be served, but to serve. And he was given advice and instructions out of the Bible and the Constitution, and he made promises. And I think that if there's any good in British culture and life and heritage and history, it lies in that promise by ordinary people as well as rulers to be at the disposal of the Almighty for what he wants to happen in the world, for the coming of his kingdom, which is greater than the United Kingdom and the other kingdoms and empires. And of course, in our history, we have strayed very far from that, ups and downs. And today, this kind of battle line of right and wrong, or God's will or self-will, goes through each person and each community in each country. And it needs daily prayer and refreshment. So I think that I was brought up with that ideal, but yet I needed something which would get me to live the best of what I believed. And this is where moral rearmament, the idea that God has a plan for the world, he has a part for you in his plan, and it may require, if there's change needed in the world, it needs to start with you. So it was a big shock to me when an Irishman actually suggested that I could examine my whole life by these standards of absolute honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love, and put right anything which was there to put right. And the thing which really stood out for me, apart from wrong habits and relationships, was my attitude to my younger brother, to whom I felt superior and jealous. And I'd been a domineering person, and I had to go, and I went and apologized to him for that and was honest about the downside of my nature, and we made a new start. And then the next thing, moral rearmament, says, as I am, or as you are, so is your nation. So I believe by God's grace, Britain has done some good things in the world, sent some good people, but all too often we have behaved like I behaved, in a domineering way to people who are militarily, economically less powerful. And we need to change and learn to serve. And I was in that spirit starting at university and making friends with Egyptians and others. And then suddenly for Britain to be invading Egypt unjustly, as we did in 1956, was a terrible thing. And I felt desolated by it. And then, of course, the idea is to put your career under God's direction as well as your character. And so for me, to just have in a time of quiet, what does God want to happen in the world? What is my part? And the answer clearly, as it came, your task is to, the bridge needed between Britain and the Arab world. But my part, use my language gift to switch to Arabic and then go where British people wanted to serve. That was a liberating thing, which set me on this course of being teachable by the Sudanese and others, and giving whatever I could give. So I still feel that there's a very great heritage, and there's the heritage of Islam. You know, my students would write English compositions about Umar ibn al-Khattab, the third caliph, wasn't he, the third Khalifa, a man of violence who turned into a man of faith and gentleness and statesmanship. And the Sudanese had that as part of their heritage at that time. And I'm asking, have they still got these models of Islam as their heritage? Because I think that in my day, what we've been talking about, Peter Holly and I, what we found of character was people who were deeply imbued with a spiritual heritage and were open to others and one could share at that level. So I've now, my wife, if she was here, would tell me to stop talking, but I hope that's some kind of a observation to what you say.
Thank you very much. That's a very thorough answer. Thank you so much. It's answered all the questions, actually. Mr. Peter Shambrook, you have something to say there? Mr. Peter Shambrook, yeah?
Yes, yes. Another Peter.
Yes.
I thank you for inviting me to say something. I don't have a long speech or many thoughts, but just to let you know that I have probably known Ustaz Peter longer than most of you, because we met in the early 1970s, and I've known Peter ever since. And I was lucky enough to spend a decade or so as a kind of running mate or assistant to Peter when Peter was when Ustaz Peter was organizing student exchange visits between Middle East universities and British universities. And so I learned a huge amount during that decade working with Peter, and it helped shape my thinking and my perspective and my lifestyle during that time. And I then became a school teacher, a history school teacher. And looking back on it, I'm retired now, but that decade working with Peter on those student exchange visits was a tremendous help to me as a school teacher. All the experiences that I had, including a couple of weeks in Khartoum and Wad Medani in, I think it was the beginning of 1986, on one of those exchange visits. My one and only time in Sudan, I'm afraid. But anyway, well done, Ustaz Peter. Well done. Well done. I'm really grateful to you.
Well, thank you, Peter. That means a lot. And people should know that Dr. Peter Shambrook has recently brought out a book called Policy of Deceit, which deals with one of Britain's several contradictory promises around 1916-17, including the Balfour Declaration, which have been so detrimental to that area ever since. And he's also prominent in a project called the Balfour Project, which aims to get Britain to recognize Palestine as a state and redress the imbalance which we caused or allowed to happen. So he's a valuable part of the much needed thinking and action in our country at present in relation to the Middle East.
Right. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for the contribution. Right. I think we're kind of out of time at the moment. Is anyone wants to say anything before we pass it over to Peter to kind of conclude everything?
I think Jeff wrote in the chat that he wants to talk, if you can give him a chance.
Jeff, yeah, sure, yeah. Go ahead, Jeff, please.
Right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Right, excellent. Alhamdulillah. All I wanted to say is, it was asked, if I remember correctly, if the experiences of us, the British teachers in the 1980s, was the same as it was for Peter Everington. I was in Kassala, Duane and Fasher the 2 years after Pete Holly was there. all I can say, and I think I speak for all of the British English teachers, and at one time there were 200 of us a year in the country. Listening to Peter, having actually met him at the AGM of the Society for the Study of Sudan's UK earlier this year, yes, our experiences were exactly the same. The essence of what is Sudan and the Sudanese, alhamdulillah, remains unchanged. Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ustaz Jeff. Now,
I have a question in the chat, please.
yes, go ahead, please. Yeah. Dr. Sakina, yes.
Yes, Ustaz Peter, was a pleasure to hear you today and a little bit about your book. I have a question for you. I mean, you got a great privilege of being very close and know our top politicians and the elites at that time. What do you think, in your perspective, what do you think the reasons behind that privilege? And do you think any teacher would have had that?
Well, I don't know. I think Sudan was a very open society at that time. I mean, I knew Dr. Muhammad Ahmed Ali when he was chief medical officer of Port Sudan, and we became friends. And then he became Minister of Health. So, I mean, just one day, I just went to his house, the house of the minister, and clapped my hands at the gateway and was welcomed in just to talk with him. And this was the kind of openness there was. Mohammed Mahjoub, the prime minister, when his relative died, there was an open house, anybody could go and condole. So I just went to condole. I think in Britain, if you make a habit of talking or seeking out important people, you're considered ambitious. I think in Sudan, it's different. At that time, there was a humility of comradeship. And my view is that if you care for a country and want the best for it, the Bible says we should pray for our rulers. So I think we can also, in our meditation, receive thoughts which could be helpful to our rulers. And even if we disagree with their politics, we can still be friends to them. And I think this is very much needed in Britain now. The saying is a country gets the government it deserves. And from some of the recent leadership in our country, that is rather doesn't speak well of the British people's judgment. So I think everybody, the ordinary citizen, has a duty to be the right kind of friend and encourager to bring out the best of our leaders. Now, your name is Sakina El-Tome. It's not Sakina El-Tome Tijani, is it? No.
No, Atom is a common name, and it's actually a twin. It's
yes. Just that it reminded the principal of our college was Mohammed Tome Tijani. So his daughter married Mamoon Sawara Dahab. So I just wondered if you, by chance, you were.
No, I'm not related. Thank you. But I appreciate your answer, and I should add that I think it has to do also with you being a teacher in your 20s. That has to do a lot with, you must have been a very charismatic young man who wanted to know about the culture that he's in. I mean, most people, we live now in the US, we tend to be isolated in our own pursuit of whether to succeed in our career. But the fact that you get involved in the politics, you get involved with all this, that said a lot about your charismatic and your love of where you were and trying to influence and trying to be influenced by your surrounding. Thank you so much and appreciate all what you did.
Thank you, and many good wishes to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sakina. Thank you, Peter. Right.
Dr. Nasruddin, hello. Dr.
Yes, go ahead,
Nasruddin,
please.
I would like to make a little contribution to Mr. Peter.
Yes, coming. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Hello, can I continue?
Yes, go ahead, please. Yeah, yes, yes.
Mr. Peter was once teaching me literature in my second year in Port Sudan Secondary School in 1962 or 63, something like that. Either way, Mr. Peter, I remember you very well. We were very young and smart. And I couldn't see, I don't know what age is making on us. Now I'm growing an old man and you're growing too. But anyway, I remember you when you were teaching me the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Tale of Two Cities, and Nicholas Nickleby. And you were crying with Nicholas Nickleby. You were really, I saw your tears coming out when you were teaching me Nicholas Nickleby, how the trance came to him and how he was isolated from society. I remember. Anyway, I got English as my means of subsistence. So I was, as a teacher of English for all these 30 years or 35 years in Bakhtaruda and abroad in the Gulf area, particularly in the Sultanate of Oman. I was so lucky as to find my old teachers' methodology. So I followed yours in teaching the literature. I followed Mr. Onur, Mr. Abid Khairi, Mr. Umar Siddiq. Do you remember those people?
Oh, yes, in Port Sudan, yes.
Port Sudan Secondary School. Yeah, but you were so young, Mr. Pete. I remember you very well.
Yes, I was
very young and very smart. And I really like your literature, your English teaching, the methodology which you're teaching me. Actually, it came to me, and I had to take English as my means of subsistence, and it became. So I've been teaching English for the past 30 or 40 years. Alhamdulillah, I gained a lot from English teaching. And that is due to Mr. Peter and the others. And Mr. Hobson was teaching me mathematics. I don't remember, I don't know. Well, I remember he passed away, Mr. Hobson. So anyway, having got contribution, I wish I had the book to read and then I can make a good comment. But unfortunately, I didn't have it. My son-in-law, Dr. Nasruddin, was there with you in this Zoom, and he was telling me about it. So if I really had the chance of getting the book, then I could have some more contribution about the book. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Peter, for what you have done. We were very young. I remember you very well. You were taking me to the sea as to breathe the air instead of doing this or that. And you're teaching us of English literature. Nicholas Nickleby, till now, I can't teach you the way you are teaching me. I remember you were crying when Telson Bank sent the message to the book of the The Tale of Two Cities. Mr. Telson is sending the message to reach the coach and to say that Mr. So-and-so was still alive. I remember you very well, Mr. Peter. Anyway, God, I will ask God to give you some more life, inshallah. Thank you for what you have done for me and for the Sudanese. And we are very proud, the British, just like our cousins. Not people say they are these people are the people who had occupied your country before. Believe me, I'm against the idea, and I think without the British, we couldn't have the University of Khartoum or Telegraph or the Jazeera scheme or others. Thank you very much for what you have done. I hope, inshallah, next time I can give more contributions about other things. Politics, I don't like to talk about politics because you told me once politics is a dirty game. I remember you in one of the debates, if you remember, on Wednesday in Port Sudan Secondary School, you were saying politics is a dirty game. And I took it from that time. And I still now, I don't like politics because my old teacher said politics is a dirty game. Do you remember that? Or you don't remember? Anyway, that students always take from the teachers a lot and they become to them as an emblem. Anyway, thank you very much. I wish you all the very best. I hope, inshallah, we'll see one day if you come to Sudan. I'm now in Sudan. And now I'm in Muscat, the Sultanate of Oman. But after the war, I hope I will be back to Sudan. I hope I will contact you. If you give Nasruddin your address to me, that will be great. And I would like to have some contact with you. I have some British friends in Portsmouth, in Scotland. I've got so many Scottish that taught English with me in the Sultanate of Oman. Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Peter. Nice to talk to you. I remember you very well. Remember Peter, who was teaching me the literature of English. Thank you very much.
Well,
Good
thank
night.
you. Good night. Now, what is the name, please? I missed the name.
Ahmed Muhammad Al-Manna. Ahmed Muhammad Al-Manna. At
Good.
that time, I think I was 16 or 15, something like that, of age.
Yes, well,
I was in Bukhari first year. I was in, I remember the first year, but second year it was in Bukhari. And third year was in Razi. And the fourth year was in Razi. These 2 years, Ali Onur took over from one of you just before the revolution. We graduated from secondary school in 1964, just before the revolution. In March, we finished, and then by October revolution broke out and things changed. And I started teaching Kamboni school and started teaching English again. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Praise be to God.
Good. Well, you can find the book online. Watch Your Step, Khawaja. You can dial that, and Mohammed Mustafa can give you an address. But, thank you very much for what you've said. I was 23 then, and I'm 89 now.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Peter. And I'm glad to see my old teachers at this age. I'm now almost 80.
شد حيلك. Keep going.
شد حيلك. تمام. شكرا جزيلا, Mr. Peter. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peter.
Thank you, Ustaz Al-Manna. I'll make sure that the book has been passed over to you. I'll pass it over to
Very good
Nasruddin.
indeed. Thank you very much
And
indeed.
hopefully you'll read it, and that would be really good. Yeah. Thank you very much. Right. So I think we're running out of time. If there is no any more contributions or any more comments, then we'll leave it for Peter to kind of conclude everything, and then we finish everything up.
I think Tahir Al-Bili want to contribute, but he. Sure? Yes, I think he didn't find the correct button to press. If you can call him. Tahir Al-Bili.
Is he still there in the?
Yeah, I think.
Just touch the microphone down there.
Yeah.
And I'll send something, ask to unmute, just something will pop up, just click on it. Okay. All right. Who is Tahir Al-Bili? Is one of the student of,
Yes, he was in Wadi Sedna secondary, and I think he is a student of Mr. Morrison. Actually, I invited him because very late he knew about this presentation, and I gave him the book, and he's here now with us. But yes, I don't know how.
I can see him there, but Ustaz Tahir, are you there? Yeah.
Touch your screen. A microphone will appear down, and then touch it, and you would be able to talk, to unmute yourself. I guess he's having technical difficulties.
Most probably, yeah, most probably.
حنان حليم افتكر كانت دارت تسأل سؤال. حنان؟
ايوه يا سكينة، شكرا. ما أعرف لو في وقت، بس هو الحقيقة أنا يعني شكرا أستاذ بيتر على كتابك، وأنا I am very impressed باللغة العربية يعني وتنطقها سليمة يعني. So this is a credit. بس كنت عايزة أعرف إنك أنت جيت السودان في 1996 لاستلام جائزة to receive the جائزة النيلين, and you came again in 2016. So from your encounter and experience, what about your reflections comparing that to your experience in 1958 to 64? You have any observation or reflections on and the contrast between the two eras?
Dr. Mohammed, this is a very big question, and I'm not sure I can answer it anyway, but and I don't know how much time there is, but you're asking me for the difference. So I don't think I can answer that beyond saying that there's a change of circumstances, but we have the friendship of the Almighty, which is unbroken, which is there for all our countries to tap into.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hanan. Dr. Abdullah?
No, I don't have
Dr.
anything to add. Tried to
Okay.
invite Tahir El-Bili, but I think he have some technical problems.
Okay.
I think we could just.
That's fine. Okay, if there is no one to add any more comments, I'll pass the microphone over to Peter, just to kind of wrap things up. And yes, over to you, Peter.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mohammed, and all friends present for the privilege of being amongst you in these circumstances, and the very great pleasure of being amongst Sudanese, previously known or unknown. And it was my joy to be part of the Sudanese family, and it still is. And at the end of the book, the poem I wrote for the Queen's visit ends up like this. I know not Sudan if I stay or I go, but I vow, having drunk of your waters, in my English heart there is ever a place for all your sons and daughters. And I think that was a thought which God gave and has kept alive, and I trust always will be there. And I just pray for the renewal which you seek, and you have to do it, which has to be done in the present climate, after the present climate of destruction. And the comradeship, the new comradeship to be built with all the peoples of the Nile Valley, South Sudan, Congo, and with that east-west pilgrimage route of Africa to the west. The new patterns are emerging. None of us know what they are or how they'll be, but they will require, and one can say the same of what's needed in Europe, and for all of us it needs an expansion of the heart and the mind and the expectation of what the Almighty can do. and a fresh comradeship. And one of the precious things I learned with my wife in Iran, because we were introduced to a Muslim leader, Hujjat al-Islam, in Abadan in the south. And he was amazed to find British and Christians who were honest about the wrong side of our country's history and change. And he hadn't heard British people talking like that before, and Christians either. And so he said, I would like to give you a verse from the Holy Quran, which I believe describes moral rearmament. And he gave it to this, and if I may, Inna ladina amanu wa amalu as-salihat sayaj'al lahum ar-Rahman wuddan, which, if I may interpret, if those who are believers practice good deeds, God, who is merciful, will give them an affection for one another. So I think that is the promise before us all as we go on our way. So God bless you and your country and your neighbors. Amen.
Ya salam, ya salam. Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter, for these nice words and the thorough discussion on your book as well, and all the things you've kind of given to Sudanese people up to now, you know. I'd like, on behalf of the Book Club 81, to thank you very much on attending this discussion this night. And thank you for all the contributors tonight. And hopefully we'll see you again in next discussion, which might be a week later, for another book, and we'll keep things going on.
Yes, well,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Ustaz Peter. Thank you for